be in the mouth of the world and say hello and peace upon Al-Azhar and make it also on others, and the skies will be bright with them. Now, let me call upon Sheikh Ahmad Tayyeb, the Sheikh of Al-Azhar Sharif from Egypt. Please, the floor is yours. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, and praise be to the Lord, and prayers upon our Prophet Muhammad, his family and companions, and his followers to the day of judgment. Your Highness, Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed Al Nahyan, the patron of this forum, scholars, thinkers, and intellectuals, ladies and gentlemen. At the very beginning, I'd like to extend my gratitude and appreciation to the United Arab Emirates, a wise government and a noble nation, for their generous patronage of this forum and their own care to hold it on annual basis in the presence of peacemakers and lovers of humanity from all the corners of the world. It gives me the pleasure to extend my gratitude and appreciation to my dear older brother, His Eminence Dr. Abdullah bin Baya, chairman of this forum, for this great effort in preparing for this forum. Wishing you all the best in order to realize our intentions and objectives. And if the investment paper had set up the objective of this forum to reveal the culture of peace and its centrality in Islam through the reading of the revelations and the ancestors' legacy, this objective is the most and the noblest that all specialists should focus upon in order to remove the darkness over the jurisprudence of Islam due to misreadings and twisted interpretations of the text that led to the fact that arms in the hands of Islamist groups, some Islamic groups, are directed to the chests of their communities and people away from their enemies and those who fight them. Yes, we are in dire need to have an honest review and a critical reading of these concepts in our Islamic heritage, clarifying them to the young students and university students in their own serious syllabus that would immunize the Arab Muslim youth to avoid the abyss of these armed militant groups. And our forum should invite the specialists and the sincere thinkers to meet and to agree upon a crystal clear strategic vision with the clear intentions to save our youth from the state of doctrinal and intellectual instability in realizing the rules of religion and the major issues of faith into a state of psychological and stability and the right understanding of a religion that contributed to the creation of international civilization and a brotherhood and companionship, global companionship that has never witnessed a similar or parallel civilization yet. This civilization that wouldn't have spread to the east and west of the world in a very short duration that puzzled the historians and philosophers up to date, had it not been built on the principle of peace among people, and had it not that the prophet of this civilization had been sent as a sign of mercy to all to all nations, and not to Muslims only, and not only to human beings, but also to the world of flora and fauna, and even inanimate creatures. We have not sent thee but to be a source of mercy to the whole world, and mercy requires and is bound to peace, and both are the two faces of the same coin. And I don't think that there is a religion and a social system or a constitutional system that pitted man and prohibited the blood of man as the messenger of Islam prohibited it. And it is certain that the Holy Quran is the only book that insisted or combined two punishments on the murderers of human beings: the punishment in this world and torture in the hereafter. And the Quran equalizes the unjust and unfair killing of one soul and the whole creatures, and the revival or the saving of that soul and the revival of those. For that reason, we to inform the Israelites that he who kills for a reason for a person without a reason, without any justification or corruption in this, he would have killed all humanity. And those who saved one, they would have saved all humanity. Islam also prohibits the intimidation of others, even it was a kind of joking. Prophet Muhammad, the prayers be upon him, he who points to his brother with a piece of an iron, the angels will curse him even if he was a full brother, a full sibling. And he also said no Muslim has the right to intimidate another Muslim. His mercy came or covered animals. Once he saw a camel whose tears were running down and signs of fatigue and exhaustion appeared on him. He called upon the owner, and he was a boy from Ansar, and he said, "Don't you fear God in this animal that God gave you as a property? That animal complained to me that you starve him and fatigue him, and you exhaust him." Here we should not only condemn this or should forget or ignore this communication between prophets and all other creatures, including the fauna and the flora or inanimate things, because people do not know an animal talking to a human being and complain to him. Because if you go to understand the relationship of man with other creatures from the Islamic perspective, you'll find out and you'll be surprised that this universe in all its planets from the Quran perspective is not dead or inanimate, solid inanimate, deprived of awareness and recognition and a life that suits them. But the Quran tells us clearly that this universe with all its elements and constituents whatsoever worship God and recite his name and kneel down for God. And although we are missing the qualification and the conditions to see that process of kneeling or recitation of the name of Almighty God, and the verses on this matter are so many, and many surahs open with these, and the human mind cannot imagine recitations or worshipping from a dead person or a lifeless creature. The description of that worshipping creature, of course, could not be described as kneeling down. Everything on this earth recites the name of Allah, but you don't understand it, and God will remain forgiveful and tolerant. Haven't you seen that everything in this, in the heavens and the earth and the sun and the moon and the stars and the mountains and the trees and the animals and many people pray to Allah and worship, and we gave Dawood an advantage oh, the mountains, go with Dawood, that is, go with him, and repeat the recitations of the name of Allah with him, and the birds. And from this logic we understand the saying of the Prophet Muhammad, prayers be upon him, from Imam Muslim: I know a stone in Mecca that used to greet me before I was sent as a prophet to this nation. And starting from these decisive texts in proving the same, it turns out that the relationship of Muslims with others, whatever the other was, a human being, an animal, or a plant, or inanimate things, in the Islamic philosophy is the relationship of friendship and companionship, based mainly on the principle of peace and knowledge, and that Islam, from this perspective specifically, shall not allow killing except in one case, one specific case, that is the retaliation of aggression or to gain a right of God Almighty, proved in a decisive and evidence text. That's why we know that Islam prevented and prohibited Muslims of killing the weak in the enemy camp and preventing them from deconstructing their own or uprooting their own trees or slaughtering their animals, but only for the need of food. You should not exceed that border or that line, because all of them are not envisaged as enemies. And even the famous writer Mustafa Rafi'i said that the swords of Muslims have ethics. Ladies and gentlemen, the task of reviving the philosophy of Islam philosophy of Islam or peace in Islam is not a matter of an option, but it is the life jacket now for us. And you have done very well in this forum to combine all this jurisprudence and clarify everything. And I hope that this forum may adopt another work, that is to collect books and magazines and periodicals issued by the terrorist militant groups, especially those published over the electronic outlets and social media, and they appear in more than one language, even not in Arabic, and they carry a very imminent danger on our youth. These books and articles should be collected, classified, and discussed and rejected and refuted in detail. And there is another job to be done to beseech these doctrinal and rules from which these militant groups spring in their work, especially the rule of, or the principle of excommunication or takfir that they originated in their own literature and misled a large section of Muslims in the West and East. And it is really sorrowful that during these days, these difficult and harsh days that we experience and live through, that there are books and publications written in the hand of some those who claim to belong to the world of scholarship, dealing with the problem of excommunication and also distinguish between what is possible and absolute takfir and a specific takfir according to certain rules. Such statements do not fit the circumstances of the nation in any way and does not support the cause of peace that we seek to achieve. Here we are not dealing with the absolute takfir or specific and this classification did not appear in the Holy Book or Sunnah, but this came from the statements of late scholars that should be re-examined and discussed and to be accepted or turned over. But we'd like to attract attention that some of these fatwas or opinions or judgments issued by this faqih or this in the past centuries were issued to face some exceptional circumstances that could not be taken as a rule for benchmarking, and the matter of excommunication is one of the best examples, as we see the terrorist groups nowadays rely on judgments taken from Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Kathir, may God bless their souls, stipulating that, saying the two shahadats are not sufficient to say that this person is a Muslim and that his blood should not be shed, but they should be subject to all the rules of Islam and to commit themselves to defend the group and the Islamic State and the Sharia as they see it. And if the Muslim or the Muslims violated these terms, they should be kafirs and they should be considered as kafirs and should be fought. And this misunderstanding that Ibn Taymiyyah said that in the 7th and the 8th Hijri centuries, and he was preoccupied with the bloody and violent wars between Muslims and the Tatars who invaded Baghdad and occupied Syria and Sham and arrived in Egypt, and where they were defeated in Ain Jalut. And the Tatars at that time showed their Islam while they were hiding their own disbelief, and the rulers of the small Islamic statelets did not find any embarrassment to ask them to have their aid to control their things. And in this field, Ibn Taymiyyah said that we have to keep these two shahadas, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, so that we can distinguish the Muslims from non-Muslims who claim that they are Muslims and they kill Muslims. And the question is, how could we benchmark and measure our Islamic communities nowadays in other communities where Muslims and Muslims live and the Arabs and the Tatars lived? And is it possible to pass the same judgment between Muslim communities in the 20th century and those that lived in the 7th and 8th Hijri centuries? How can we do that? And despite the differences and how could these differences, context and other jurisprudential and political and harsh circumstances that resulted in this type of fatwas or provisional fatwas to appear again and to justify to these takfir groups to declare jihad on communities that believe in Allah and His prophets and say their prayers and pay the poor alms, zakat, and fast Ramadan and go to Hajj? And where is that agreement among the scholars that the fatwa changes with the time, place, circumstances, and other things? This bloody anarchy that take from the statement of takfir as an evidence requires a kind of mobilization by the scholars to face it in every city in the Arab world. And this could not be made but by going down to the field of education, especially the pre-university education, perhaps a meeting where educators meet in the Arab world, and those who are in charge of religious schools should meet to prepare a scientific curricula that would agree with the scholars to prohibit takfir completely without any twisting, and to be put in a certain textbook or a certain syllabus that would justify and refute all the claims of the takfiris. I think that such a meeting became an urgent necessity because focusing on education or the educational discourse is more important than focusing on the public discourse, because the wide base of our public are still immune against the culture of takfir, contrary to the new generation that acquires knowledge on the online, and they are completely penetrated by these groups targeting first of all the young students of the high schools and universities. Allow me, ladies and gentlemen and scholars, to conclude my statement to say that the campaigns launched by the media on the religious discourse, considering it as the first and the last responsible for the emergence of ISIS and its followers and siblings and friends, they are very superficial and shallow in simplifying things, summing up the reasons of the appearance of these groups in one reason, that is the discourse of the scholars, but in in fact, they ignore and they turn blind eyes to other hidden factors that made it possible for the young people to resort to arms in order to change their own communities. The failures, the successive failures, and the culture of marginalization that this generation experienced at different levels contributed very clearly to the state of despair and disappointment, especially the political, economic, and psychological failures. And the religious discourse is not the only solution, but it is part of the solution of the problem. There are other discourses, political, economic, educational, cultural, media, and artistic. All of them were kind of bulldozers of demolition for the aspirations and the expectations of nations and dreams. And now they need more reform, which is not less important than the reform of the discourse. Thank you for your attention, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much indeed.